Using Jamaica's nominal per capita GDP at the end of fiscal year 2023-24, Madam Speaker, and our GDP per capita at the end of fiscal year 23-24 is projected to be roughly $7,000 using the GDP figures from Stockton and the population data that we have and the closing exchange rate. It has gone up. Anybody notice? It's now $7,000. But Madam Speaker, we have a lot of catching up to do because Trinidad and Barbados, for example, are moving at the same time. And they are now at $20,000. But you're seeing, Madam Speaker, we're stuck at a particular level for a long time. And nobody has been noticing, but today the per capita GDP is $7,000.
Major praise for the trajectory of our gross domestic product. But what exactly is that? Do you know?
So why are you going to put me on the spot like that?
I really don't know. I really don't know. We don't say anything about it, honestly.
Gross domestic product.
No, I feel done.
If I remember correctly, it's gross domestic product. I'm not very familiar with it, but I do know that it has something to do with the overall output of the economy, and I know the better it is, then overall it reflects the quality of life that the citizens live.
Well, thank you for that comment. And so there's no real easy way. I would say the definition, she's absolutely correct, that GDP is a gross domestic product of a nation or economy. When you look at what GDP is, it's really the spend, overall spend of consumers. You take into account all the investments in the country. You add in the government's spend, less the taxes that they have collected. And then you take into account a country's exports and imports. So for a country like Jamaica, our exports tend to be a lot less than our imports. We're heavily driven by imports, so it's a negative number. So when you take that from all of our consumer spending and our investments, you get to what they call a GDP, or gross domestic product.
And this GDP is divided by the number of persons in the country to give the per capita or head count of the population. Now, sometimes you may hear nominal GDP or real GDP. Nominal GDP is the total value of goods and services produced within a given period annually. However, real GDP is adjusted to factor inflation, and that's really to say, can $1,000 purchase the same thing today that was purchased last year?
There was a period within that time that there was no growth. In fact, there was a negative, right? And so when you look at it, and you look at the last couple of years, in particular coming out of COVID, it's quite encouraging, and it gives a good indication to economists where the trajectory of the economy is going, which is in the right direction, which really means that we're able as a country to pay our bills, to service our debts, and to encourage productivity.
So, you might be wondering, what does GDP have to do with me? Well, you see, it's a cycle, and all of us have a role to play in that cycle.
From a macro level, when a country is looking at how does it stimulate productivity, how does it get or put back money into the economy? Because remember, consumer spending only happens if they have the money to spend.
Now, how is the government able to drive productivity in the economy? There are two ways. One is to export much more than we import, which is not the case for us, not yet anyways. The other is if our consumer spending and our investments are high enough to allow the government to spend more money as well. Hence, you may see the government pumping money back into the system from time to time, by way of wage increase or a tax break to help especially low-income earners in this regard.
For example, the recent budget where the government said it's going to increase the threshold on income tax from 1.5 to 1.7 million. That actually is pumping $8 billion back into persons who are at the low income level that they can spend back into the economy.
Thus driving consumer spending that in turn drive productivity and a rise in the GDP.
Our unemployment is down to 4.5%. And that's at the same time that we're seeing GDP growing at a rate of over 10% year over year. So it's a correlation between the two. So if the government is spending more, it's going to affect the GDP, right? But in an effort for it to spend more, whether it's in giving back in increasing the threshold or to give back in reducing any sort of duties or income tax. It's driving the economy by putting money back into the system, allowing people to either save or to put that money back into spending. So the government spending, it depends on how it wants to spend it, whether it's putting it back into revenue avenues is going to drive productivity, which in turn drives the economy.
So how can Jamaica raise its GDP?
Speaking from a private sector point of view, the thing that we really look to focus on is one is consumer spending, but also is the exports and imports of a country. So if you look at Jamaica, we rely heavily on imports, and our exports, really our focus has always been on servicing our local economy and servicing the diaspora by extension. So our exports have never been as great as our imports. And in fact, probably our imports could be anywhere from 8 to 10%, 10 times that of our exports. And so that would affect our GDP.
Which brings us back to the finance minister's point on our current GDP status. You'll remember he enthusiastically said that the country's per capita GDP is roughly about $7,000 compared to that of our Caribbean neighbors, which is $20,000. So why is he excited?
I think we should celebrate the fact that we are on a good trajectory in that relation. I think we do need to look at countries like Trinidad and Barbados, who GDP are 3 times ours, and look at what it is that they are excelling at. And to me, it goes down to their ability to manufacture at a low cost and their ability to export into territories that are not just where their diaspora is. I agree. I think that there's things that we should be celebrating.